Hello, and thank you for joining us here on Broncos and Bourbon. I am your host, Phil Milani. Finally, it is NFL Draft Week. No more speculation, no more mock drafts coming up Thursday at least. Just a few more days of that stuff. And I, for one, am relieved because, I think that the start of draft season is very exciting. Like, you want to see some of the mock drafts and, see what people are thinking, especially for the Broncos. But then by this point, I'm done with it all and I'm just ready to get to the actual draft. And this episode, I just wanted to talk a little bit about the draft process, what goes on maybe a little bit behind the scenes, and then also recap a little bit what we heard last week from George Paton and Sean Payton, the most interesting press conference of the entire year, because they're here to talk about the draft, but nobody's actually saying anything. So all these teams all around the league are doing this press conference and they don't really say anything. So it's interesting. They talk, but they don't say anything. So this week we won't have a guest here, but I'll just talk about the draft a little bit and then I'll come up with the Broncos prediction here for you. I'll look into the crystal ball, if you will. But in reality, nobody knows what the Broncos are going to do, especially sitting at 20. So much can happen with those first 19 picks that it's impossible to actually tell what the Broncos are going to do. But I'll just talk about that a little bit. I will say, coming up for the draft on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday after the draft, I'll have a little bit of a recap and offer up some of my thoughts on what I think the Broncos did that night. So that's what this episode will be. Next week, I'll be back with a guest, and we'll discuss and break down the whole draft and what we thought unfolded here for the Broncos. But I'll just talk a little bit about what I think today, and then I'll also do a bourbon review for you at the end of this. So with that, let's talk a little bit about what happens for this draft lead-up process, because it's really a 12-month process. These guys are working on this year-round. Right when this draft ends, they're going to start getting on to the next draft. And so it's really a year-round process with scouts. They're working their areas and they're understanding what's going on here with the players in their areas, and they're just constantly working on that. But in this process, when the Broncos front office is really starting to get after the draft here, of course they're breaking down a lot of tape. Guys like George Payton, the assistant general manager, all of the college side, they're going to these college games and scouting throughout the year. And then when the season ends, they all get together here in a big room and they talk about the players. And all the scouts offer their thoughts on all these prospects, and they talk about the guys in their area, right? They talk, okay, hey, this guy went to Ohio State. The guy who scouts the Midwest area, stand up, talk to us about what you see. Then they'll say, okay, you assistant GM, you talk about what you see on tape here. The guy who did the cross scouting, that's another thing that these guys do. So the Midwest scout will offer up his reports on all this during the season, and then a scout from a different area will do a cross scout on that area. So a lot of different eyeballs are going on all these prospects, and then they'll just talk about all of the guys and all the prospects. Then the Broncos position coaches will come in and they'll talk about what they've seen on tape and what they've heard and what their sources around the league are saying, and they'll offer their thoughts and say, hey, I really like this kid. Here's what I see on tape. Here's what this happened. Here's what this happened. So you're getting both the coaches talking about it and the scouts. Okay, so they're getting a wide range of opinions on each prospect that the Broncos could be considering. Okay, and then they'll do the combine. They'll get to have these quick meetings with guys. In my opinion, those meetings are very interesting because they're very short, okay? You're sitting in a room and there's a clock up, on a monitor somewhere, and you know exactly how much time is left here, okay? A lot of the answers I feel are just like sort of rehearsed, and the goal, I think, for any front office is to just get a feel and get to know what these people are like. How do they come into the room? Do they have a big presence? The famous video of Pete Carroll taking his shirt off when DK Metcalf comes in. Let's get a sense of this guy's personality. Let's rattle him a little bit. Let's throw him off a little bit. Maybe we'll talk really a lot of X's and O's and see if they're ready and prepared to do that. Maybe we'll talk to them just to get a chance to get to know them a little bit better. Just get a feel for what they are. But I think a lot of the stuff, if you don't do that, is just really rehearsed and planned. And it's kind of like a job interview nowadays when, the hiring manager says, well, why do you want to work here? Okay, the answer is rehearsed, okay? You're not really getting a good answer there. So I think that is more of just, let's get a feel for what these guys are like, okay? Then, of course, there's pro days where they'll fly out and see the guys work out. They'll talk to their college coaches. They'll get a sense of what, what's this guy like on campus? What is he, what is his interests? What are his interests? That kind of thing, and get a sense for what they feel like on the football field in a college setting, okay? Then you get these top 30 visits. You get to have 30 guys come to your facility, and they'll talk and meet and spend a day together, and you'll really get a sense to know what they're like. You can put them up on the board and have them draw plays. You can have them really talk about football. You can have their tape ready to go and break down specific plays from their college career and what their thought process was, and you get to have lunch with them, and you get just a real good sense for what they're like. Now, that being said, you could bring in a guy for a top 30 visit to throw other teams off the scent a little bit, like, hey, they're bringing in this guy. Maybe they're interested in him. Maybe you don't bring in a guy if you're really interested in, because you don't want other teams to know you're interested in. So the top 30 is very interesting to me. I think the whole process is very interesting from a reporting aspect, because reporters are chomping at the bit for any kind of information. Oh, hey, this prospect met with the Broncos at the Combine. This prospect came in for a top 30 visit. Well, or, hey, the Broncos were at this guy's pro day. Like, for example, the Broncos were up at CU's pro day a couple of weeks ago, right? The Broncos aren't going to draft Travis Hunter or Shedeur Sanders, right? Maybe they're there to check out a different player, a wide receiver or something like that for later on in the draft. But one thing you must remember is that the Broncos are going to face Travis Hunter at some point in the schedule, okay? Maybe not this year, maybe next year. You want to get a sense to know what these guys are like. The scouting process never ends, okay? You get a sense of what Travis Hunter is like. Then when you're facing Travis Hunter, you know a little bit of more information. So there's always something to learn during this process. The evaluation process, you want to learn about these guys for your own drafting process, if they're a prospect for your team, or if you want to learn more about them for when you face them down the road. So the reporting of this, everybody's trying to put out information right now, but the reality is you don't know who the Broncos really like. You don't know what that board looks like. You just really don't know unless you're on the inside there. And with the Broncos sitting at 20, it's really hard to know what's going to happen there in those first few picks. So that's a little bit about the process, right? After they've gathered all this information, they'll start stacking their board, okay? They like this guy first in their in this position group. They like this guy second. They like this guy third. They'll flip cards upside down if, hey, this guy's got character issues. This guy's undraftable. We won't take him no matter what. They stack the board, okay? And then they do that all the way through all these rounds so that you know, okay, 7th round, here's what our grade is on this guy. Here's who we need somebody at this position. Here's who's left. Here's who our top guy is. They just make it like a little bit easier that way, okay? And so they stack the board like that. Then they'll go through a lot of mock drafts, especially with the Broncos sitting at 20. They'll do their own mock drafts in the room based off their studying of what they think other teams are going to do, okay? 1, Tennessee will do this. 2, 3, 4. They'll go down the road just to see, okay, hey, maybe you get down to 8, right? Maybe if Ashton Jeanty's still there, we could do XYZ. Maybe this guy's still available, we'll do this. They'll go through mock. They'll mock it all the way through so that at 20, here's who we think will be available. Here's what's realistic. Here's what we would do in this situation. You do a lot of like scenarios, okay? And then that way, come draft day, you're really prepared and it's not just insane while you're on the clock there, okay? You do a lot of prep work to avoid those crazy scenarios and making a rash decision. You make the decision now, you're in your prep work so that when the moment comes, you know exactly what you're going to do. And in my opinion, George Paton is very good at this. This man loves to work. This man loves to grind on tape. This man lives for this. And you could see it in the results in his drafts. A big reason for the Broncos' turnaround has been the drafting. There's guys who they've brought in that are playing significant minutes that they're getting in day 2, day 3. And these guys are playing well for the Broncos. And that's how teams have sustained success in the NFL. Rosters turn over so much every year. You don't really notice it as fans because like the top 5 or 6, 7 guys. But if you're really locked in, like people who listen to Broncos and Bourbon, you'll know, hey, on the back end of the roster of those back 53, but 13, 14, 15 guys are always kind of cycling there, okay? There's always guys who are getting turned over, and this roster will look really different than the roster did last year. So knowing what's going on here is going and doing your homework leading up to the draft, having a successful draft is how you build long-term success. So that's sort of the lead up here to the draft. And I thought that one thing that George Payton highlighted last week in his press conference was you like to have an exit plan. Okay, if your guy when you're about to come up isn't there, and you don't see good value for players that you like, but you're sitting at 20, and you're like, nah, we don't really have the guy we want at 20. You want to have an exit plan, and you build those right now where you're talking about, hey, anybody interested in coming up into 20 who might want to wheel and deal here? That way, in the moment, you pick up the phone, you say, hey, are you still interested in what we talked about? Yes. Okay, here's what the chart shows. Okay, there's a chart. You look at, okay, round 1, pick 20. Here's the value of that. There's like a numerical number there. That's what it equals in what we need to get in return. Okay, so round 1, pick 20. We need another one, and we need a future second or third, or whatever it is, so that it equals the right point value. Then you execute the trade. Okay, George has these exit plans already in place, and he said last year during the draft, there wasn't ever a time where they were on the board and they didn't have an exit plan. That's how much work goes into this. I think that like the majority of fans, me included here, we know the top, like the first day prospects. We know maybe some of the second round prospects. We don't know what's going on in round 7. They draft guys that you've never heard of before. And those guys could come in and be a spark, and you hit on a guy, and look at the Terrell Davises, the Shannon Sharps, Tom Brady, obviously. If you hit on a guy later, that comes in and can change your franchise around. And so that's where the homework comes in. And that's how you build success here. And looking at what the Broncos are at here, sitting at 20, I'll make a prediction here, but really, I'm not sure. The Broncos did such a great job in free agency, in my opinion, that they can just draft the best available player at 20. They get to 20, if they've sat there and guys have gone off the board, they don't really have to take a running back, right? Everybody's been obsessed with these running backs. They don't have to take a running back. They could take a wide receiver. Heck, they could take a defensive tackle at 20 and continue to build, and fortify certain positions, They just because they brought back DJ Jones doesn't mean that they don't want to add another guy there. Do you know what I mean? So I think that they've positioned themselves where they want to be at this point because they can really take anybody. And when you're sitting at 20, almost all positions have good value at 20, right? An offensive tackle, fine. A guard, good. Running back, a wide receiver, a tight end. All of these positions make sense. Another defensive tackle, a linebacker. You can find value there at 20 at any position. So the Broncos are in a really good spot, if you ask me here. I thought it was interesting, though. Sean Payton, we know that he likes to be aggressive. If there's a guy that he wants and he's still on the board, an Ashton Jeanty, for example. Say if the Broncos have reviewed Ashton Jeanty, he sent out that letter. They're jacked up about how he compared himself to Saquon, and they just got to have him. Sean Payton likes to do this, and he said that he's like a golfer. Maybe they shouldn't pick up that driver, but they do anyway because they like to go for it. I'm in that same boat there. I'm going to cut the corner. I'm going to let it rip. Grip it and rip it. They're going to go for it. That's what Sean Payton brings to the table. He wants to win, and I think that combination of Sean Payton and George Payton, it's perfect to me. I liked how Sean was like, yeah, we sit so close together. I drank out of his water bottle by accident. I mean, these guys are grinding. They're spending all day together. And I think that, one, they're excellent talent evaluators, but two, their personalities mesh well together for the draft because, one, they're like yin and yang. They balance each other out on the scales here. And Sean is fiery. He wants to go up and he wants to get his guy. George, very calming presence, a measured approach to things, I would say. They both want to win. They both want to win from now on, but I think that Sean likes to he likes to go for it, right? So would it surprise me if they went up and they said, look, we got to capitalize on Bo Nix being on his rookie deal. We got to go up and get a guy like Ashton Jeanty. He's going to completely change how we play offense. He's going to give us the weapon we've been looking for. He's going to take us from this point to this point. I think that you could see the Broncos. You would understand. You would like it as a fan. You'd say, yeah, we got our guy. We're going to be in it now. You could see them doing that, right? You could see these guys coming up and saying, look, we got to cash in now while Bo's on his rookie deal, while we've got this window here we feel like we can take advantage of. Let's go out and do it. To me, I wouldn't necessarily do that. The Broncos have just come out of this Russell Wilson fog where they've given up all these draft assets. They didn't have a first-round pick forever. You want to think, okay, we value these a little bit more now just because we've been missing this recently here. And the roster, while it's in a good spot, okay, I think the roster's in a really solid spot. I think you always are wanting to add and build. Like, to me, I have to think at this point, success for the Broncos next season. You let me know, what do you think would be successful for the Broncos next season? To me, it's either you're winning the division or you're at least winning one playoff game. That's the next step here for the Broncos, okay? Just making the playoffs? We did that last year. Just having a winning record? We did that last year. They got to take a step here, okay? And that, to me, is winning a playoff game. It's maybe winning the division. And so what is it going to take to do that? And then you also have to be thinking, okay, when are the Broncos going to be Super Bowl contenders? If they get Ashton Jeanty and they mortgage these guys, is that enough to get into that picture? If it's not, then you got to say, okay, we're going to want those first-round draft picks in a year or two because that's when we're going to be Super Bowl contenders. They've got to balance this out, okay? They've got to think short term, next season, the year after that. They've also got to look long term here, okay? If you're being realistic, is this roster good enough to beat the Chiefs? Maybe if certain things go the right way, but you'd have to say that the Chiefs, They've won the division a million years in a row. They've played in every Super Bowl in the last million years. Okay? They're going to be the kings of the AFC West until they're not. So that's how I look at it. Like a lot would have to go right for the Broncos to win the division. Is Jeanty enough to do that? If you think so, do it. If not, then you're saying, okay, maybe it won't happen this year. Maybe we'll take a step this year. Maybe we'll win a playoff game. But really, in 2 years, that's when we're going to go for it. And if that's the case, then you're going to want that first round pick in 2026. And you can't go up for Jeanty this year, okay? That's what you got to have to balance, okay? You have to think about, okay, what's reasonable for this year, 2025? If you think that you can go for it with a guy like Jeanty, do it. If not, you got to have a measured approach here, okay? So I think that George Payton and Sean Payton agree on that. They see that. And in my opinion, the roster needs to continue to add quality guys. Depth, okay? The Broncos have been really healthy, okay? Bo Lowry has come in and really revitalized how they train the players, how they lift weights, how they do things, how they train them in the training room and take care of them, take care of their bodies. They've been extremely lucky, okay? Not lucky, healthy, okay? Some luck goes into that, but I also think that Bo has really made a big impact there. So it's not all luck, but some of it is luck. And I think you're going to continue to want to build depth. You're going to want to build quality guys. You want the level of the whole roster to get better. And so in my opinion, I would continue to draft well. You got a bunch of picks in the top 100 here. Let's bring these guys in. Let's get them so that they're playing some minutes this year. They're playing some special teams. And maybe you get a starter or two for them for this year. And then next year, then you're in business, okay? Another round of free agency, another draft, and if you're hitting on these guys, then 2026. To me, that's what makes sense. But if they really like Jeanty, or maybe it's another player, go up and do it, because if you hit and it works out, you're a genius. If you miss, if they go up and get Jeanty, and for whatever reason it doesn't work out, or they go up and they take a guy and they've used up their draft capital and it doesn't work, you look back on it and you say, what were they thinking? You know, almost all of us in the moment with the Russell Wilson trade were just ecstatic and said yes. But now you look back on it and you're like, what were you thinking giving up all that? So if it works, everybody's a genius. If it doesn't work, everybody's it's a disaster. So I think that it's important to not get overly excited. That's my take, okay? I think that the Broncos, looking at the mock drafts here, they could still take a tight end, if you ask me, okay? Evan Ingram can do a lot of things. He can also mentor a guy like Loveland. I think if he's available at 20, you got to think long and hard about that, okay? Because you can get a tight end who can really, you can have two tight ends on the field at the same time. You can start building for the future. Evan Ingram has some injury concerns. You say, okay, hey, here's another guy in case something happens to Evan. I think that if you like one of these tight ends, you could still take a tight end there, okay, at 20. I think that you could still take a guy on the defensive side of the ball, and especially at defensive tackle, on the interior. You can't have enough of those good guys, okay? Look at what the Eagles did, okay, in the Super Bowl. You've got to be able to get pressure on Patrick Mahomes and make him miserable, okay? So you can never have enough of these guys, okay, who are just going to make his life really unhappy, okay? So I think that you could still continue to add on the defensive interior, but it does seem like a running back would really move the needle on the offensive side of the ball and take the Broncos to an extra gear here. And if you ask me, I really like this TreVeyon Henderson kid out of Ohio State. They were at his pro day. I think that one thing I like looking at these guys is what kind of high school player were they? Were they somebody who was relatively an unknown and then really caught fire and hit the stage big at college? Or has this guy been a stud forever? Okay, both are good and bad. Okay, right? But TreVeyon Henderson was the number one running back coming out of high school, 5-star. He's been the guy for a long time here. That's something that I kind of like in some of these guys, is that they've been the guy and they've delivered when expectations were really high. They've already delivered. You know, you're a 5-star running back going to Ohio State. You got to deliver, and TreVeyon Henderson has. Okay. The other thing that I like about him is his pass protection. You know, if you read stuff about him, all these experts say that he is the best pass protector in this draft class. And with Bo Nix, you can't let him get hurt, right? So pass protection is going to be absolutely crucial here. Okay. This guy can play all 3 downs because he can pass pro. Okay. Even though he's a little bit undersized, it's more of a mental thing, pass pro, okay? First of all, you've got to be hard-nosed and not afraid, okay? You're going to get blown up here by somebody who weighs 50 pounds more than you, okay? So you've got to have that mentality, and you've also got to be smart enough to know where pressure is coming from, okay? So pass pro is going to be huge, and this guy is dynamic in the passing game, okay? 3rd downs, he's going to be dynamic. Maybe he doesn't play all 3 downs to start, but maybe he gets there, okay? So I think that my guess is going to be TreVeyon Henderson, okay? We'll see if I'm right or not, okay? That's my guess. He seems like a guy that the Broncos would like. Played big-time college football, okay? And he's got all the attributes that you're looking for. Some people said that he's like a lighter, like a light version of Jahmyr Gibbs. If he's anything like that, take him. He's a dynamic player. He can give this offense something that it's been missing. And I think that you could do that. And that's what I think that they'll do, okay? My only hesitancy is that this draft class is really loaded at the running back position. And so that's one thing that gives me hesitancy. The other thing is that I know Sean Payton likes to draft physical specimens that play offensive line, defensive line, pass rush, guys who you can't coach that up, right? You can't coach 6'4", 245 pounds. You can't make somebody that. But I know Sean thinks that if he gets a guy who has some good skills at a running back position, he can coach him up to get to the point where he wants him to be a dynamic player. I know he feels like running back, wide receiver, he can find these guys. Unless he finds somebody. I'm getting too animated here. Background's falling apart. I think that they could find guys maybe later in the draft, but if you really like a guy, what difference does it make? Go ahead and get Henderson, okay? But I'm not trying to hedge my bets here, but I do think a wide receiver would make sense. The Broncos are still looking for that number 2 wideout, okay? Marvin Mims can play anywhere, but he's not like that traditional guy who's always going to be lining up on the other side of Cortland Sutton, okay? He's that guy who can just sort of play everywhere in the slot. Devon Vele really came on. If they don't draft a wide receiver early, that'll let you know what they think of Vele, okay? The draft will always give you insight in the current roster, okay? If they don't do something, that means they're high on what they've got, okay? So if they don't take a wide receiver early, that lets you know that they like Devon Vele. So I think that they do like Devon Vele. Sean Payton was talking about him at the end of the season at that press conference, and I do think that they like him. So I think that spot is still up for grabs, but I think they like Vele. So that's why I'm going to go with running back. Okay. That's my pick. I'm going to stick with that. I'm sticking with TreVeyon Henderson. Okay. And we'll see what happens. Okay. Remember that the draft is very interesting. If they think that TreVeyon Henderson is their guy and they think that he could be available 10 picks later, maybe he's available at the start of the 2nd round, maybe you'll see the Broncos trade back. Okay. They might trade back, go into the 2nd round, pick up some extra capital, and still get TreVeyon Henderson, right? So the draft, it's not just about getting the guys that you want, because, of course, at the end of every night, we got the guy that we wanted. We had 2 draftable grades on this position, and he was our top guy, and we took him. That's a story after every draft, right? We this was our top running back, and we got him at 20. We can't be any happier. That's going to be the case. But if you think that the Broncos get him at the beginning of the second round and they move back, then that's the smarter pick, right? It's kind of like poker to me, okay? Say you win a couple $100 playing poker. Okay, great hand. That's awesome. But if you had a great hand and you misplayed it and you could have won a couple $1,000, okay, then it wasn't such a great hand, right? So it's how you play it. How do you play it? I'm not playing poker for that kind of money, but maybe some people are, okay? So did you get good value? Was it a reach on a guy? I don't think a guy like TreVeyon Henderson would be a reach at 20, but maybe how the pieces fall, you could go back into the second round. Remember, though, you don't get that fifth-year option in the second round. So that's why sometimes you see at the end of the first round, teams trade up and they take a quarterback. Lamar Jackson is a great example. Trade up, that way you get the fifth-year option. So you have to think about those things too. Is this, if you hit on a guy, then you're going to want that fifth-year option. So you might want to just move back and stay in the first round and still take the player, or otherwise you lose that fifth-year option. So it is crazy how much is on the table with the draft and how calm things are in the draft room. Very calm. It's not crazy ever in there. And that just kind of lets you know about the preparedness here. So I give those guys a ton of credit. They do so much work getting ready for this process. It really is amazing. So that's what I'll say about that. I want to get to a bourbon review here, okay? Because I haven't done one in a while. And I haven't done an episode in a while. So to remind you here, we're going to be back Thursday, Friday, and Saturday next week leading up to the draft. Okay. So anyway, here's our bourbon review here. If you can see, this is called Still Austin. Okay. This is sort of an up-and-coming distillery out of, you guessed it, Texas. Okay. It says right here, 100% Texas-grown grains. Okay. And I've enjoyed this a little bit here, so I have opened this. On the bottle here, San Francisco World Spirits Competition. That's like the big spirits deal. If you win there, you're doing all right. They've won double gold there, okay? So this is Still Austin. I like the bottle. I like the design of it. It's got a cork. That's big to me. I like the cork, okay? And I've dropped the cork. Oh, my gosh. I'm rattled. This is the straight bourbon whiskey, okay? They have another one that my favorite website, Breaking Bourbon, they said it was one of the best bourbons of the year. Not the straight bourbon. This is sort of their entry level here. But the other one, they named one of the best bourbons of 2024. This one's called The Musician, okay? This bourbon is called The Musician. On their website, they say music brings people together, gets the conversation going, it builds camaraderie, and that's what they're hoping this bourbon does. I kind of like it. A little cheesy, but I kind of like it. I kind of like it. I don't know. So we'll just pour a little in this one here. It's a 98.4 proof, okay? And I like the color. It's a little bit dark. It's like a dark copper color, but it's got a nice look to it here. And the nose, it's like definitely picking up cinnamon, brown sugar, light citrus, maybe a little bit. It's spicy. It's spicy. Cinnamon, a little bit of sugar. That's a big cinnamon and like a maple syrup. It is really spicy. The finish is pretty good. I got this bottle for $36. I think it retails for $45. So I was happy with that purchase, but it's a pretty good finish. It's like, it's more complex than, I think that this is like it says right here, aged at least 2 years. Okay, so it's still like a young whiskey here, but it's It's surprisingly, it's not like really overcomplicated, complex. I'm not going to be like thinking about it for days and days, but it's more than just like stuff you get at this price point that's like wham bam, thank you, ma'am. It's pretty good. It's got a nice finish, a little bit complex. It is very spicy. And at the proof 98.4, you wouldn't think it would be that spicy, but it does have a little bit of a oomph. Definitely would drink that on the rocks. And that's good value. I think this is an up and coming distillery here. And if you could find this, I would definitely check this out. People in Texas love themselves some Texas. Texas is all over this bottle. But I like it. This is a very nice bourbon. And for $36, you cannot beat that deal. So that's my bourbon review this week. Let me know what you think. Have you ever tried Still Austin? Let me know what you think. Leave a comment here. And, let me know what you think. I want to get your draft predictions. Come on. Put it on the line. Put it in the comment section here. Let me know what you think. And, happy drafting to you guys. Just a couple of days away now. And like I mentioned, no more mock drafts. That's the big thing to me. I cannot stand any more mock drafts because at 20, you really have no idea what you're doing. And it gets clicks. So I get why you keep putting out mock drafts, but I cannot read another mock draft. So I'm ready to just get to draft day, see what the Broncos do. If they swing big, man, it would be exciting if they got a guy like Jeanty, okay? But that tells you that they're really going for it here, which is exciting, right? But just to me, I think that having a little bit more of a conservative approach here, continuing to build, continuing to just elevate this thing, letting them grow together, understanding that this is a process, to me, that makes more sense. I will not say trust the process. I can't handle that. So let's not do that. But let's just understand that there's steps to this thing. Rarely do you just go from 0 to 100 here. They made the playoffs last year. To me, success is either winning the division or winning a playoff game. And then let's see. I think it's going to take more than just a Jeanty to be able to really compete with the Buffaloes, the Ravens, the Chiefs. I think it's going to take more, okay? There's always a team that goes from last to first in a division, but that team rarely goes all the way and wins the Super Bowl. So I think it's going to take a process. I think this roster is really getting better and better and better. And I think with Sean Payton, they're playing 1 or 2 wins above. He gives you that with his expertise. But it's going to take 1 or 2. I think it's going to take 1 or 2 more draft classes, free agent classes, to really get there and have really high expectations. So I think that I would just stay true, take TreVeyon Henderson, let this offense continue to grow, and go from there. So let me know what you think. I'll be back Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and we'll also do a draft recap. We'll try and get somebody who really knows what they're talking about and not just a Yahoo like me. So hopefully you enjoyed that. Hopefully you learned something a little bit about the process. And hopefully you're not like, will this guy shut up? So that's all I'll say. All right. Thank you so much for joining us. Go out and give yourself a Still Austin. Try it out and let me know what you think. That's going to do it for us. For Broncos and Bourbon, I'm Phil Milani.